When Amber Williams first bought the old, abandoned school building for a fraction of its worth, she thought she was getting a fixer-upper for her growing mechanic business. But what she didn't expect was that beneath the cracked tiles and dusty classrooms lay a secret that would change her life forever. What started as a simple renovation project quickly spiraled into something darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if you're hooked already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode takes a turn you'll never see coming. Amber Williams had always believed that risk was part of the process. As a mechanic and self-made businesswoman, she'd spent years navigating the uncertain world of auto repairs, from patching up broken engines to taking on jobs others deemed impossible. But when the opportunity to buy the old school building on the edge of town presented itself, Amber saw something more than just a chance to expand her shop. The building had been vacant for years, decaying quietly beneath the weight of time. The town had long since outgrown it, and the whispers about its past faded with every generation. Everyone thought it was worthless, a relic of a bygone era, only fit for demolition. But Amber wasn't like the others. She saw potential where others saw decay. A $50,000 price tag for an old school building? That was a steal in her eyes. The location was perfect for a new workshop, and with enough work, she could turn the space into something memorable, maybe even a destination. She had visited the site several times before making her offer, walking through the large rooms, imagining the steel walls lined with tools and the clang of wrenches on metal. It was a dream in the making. But when Amber signed the papers and officially took ownership, she had no idea that her investment would soon lead her down a path none of her plans had to accounted for. Amber parked her rusty old pickup truck in the gravel lot and walked into the building for the first time as its owner. The air smelled of dust, mildew, and forgotten memories. The windows, boarded up for years, let in a faint, golden light that barely cut through the layers of grime. Her boots echoed against the floor as she stepped inside, mentally calculating how much work was ahead of her. The rooms were silent, the walls cracked and peeling. Everything looked abandoned, and that's exactly what she needed. A blank slate, a new beginning. She took a deep breath, letting the cool, musty air fill her lungs. The place needed a lot of love. A new coat of paint, new floors, new wiring, maybe even some drywall to cover the large cracks that stretched across the walls like old scars. But Amber didn't mind the work. She was used to labor, used to rolling up her sleeves and getting her hands dirty. As she wandered through the long, empty halls, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. There was an odd energy in the building, something that seemed off. Maybe it was the history of the place, the ghost of students long gone, teachers who had once stood at the blackboard. Or maybe it was the building itself, sagging and old, with too many secrets hidden behind its fading walls. Amber chuckled to herself, brushing off the unease that crept up her spine. "It's just an old building," she muttered. "Nothing to be scared of." But even as she said it, she knew deep down that the old school had more to offer than she had imagined. And what seemed like a simple real estate investment was about to turn into a discovery that would change everything. The work began immediately. Amber called in a team of local contractors to help with the heavy lifting, tearing down old walls, stripping floors, and pulling out the worn-out wiring. The building had been left untouched for so long that the very structure seemed to resist the change. Amber's crew was good, but they were working against decades of neglect. Each day, she spent hours navigating the maze of classrooms and hallways, picking up the pieces of a once thriving school. The smell of fresh paint and the sound of drills echoed through the halls. But Amber couldn't shake the feeling that something was hiding beneath it all. One afternoon, as she passed through the old gymnasium, she stopped in her tracks. The basketball court, once the heart of the school, was now a shadow of its former self. The worn-out bleachers sat like silent spectators, and the netless hoop sagged above the cracked floor. Amber noticed something peculiar, a faint pattern in the worn wood, as though the floorboards had been disturbed. The building had a history of renovations, yes, but this felt different. She crouched down, inspecting the area. Her fingers brushed the surface of the floor, feeling a slight shift. Something was buried beneath this wood. She could feel it. Without thinking, Amber pulled a crowbar from her belt, prying up the boards one by one. The floor groaned in protest, but eventually, she made a small hole. As she pulled up the last piece of wood, her heart skipped a beat. Beneath the floor, there was a hatch metal, cold and untouched by time. It looked like a door that hadn't seen the light of day in years. Her mind raced. Could this be another forgotten utility room? Or was there more to this school than she had bargained for? The hatch was sealed tightly, but Amber's curiosity was overwhelming. She wiped the dust off the metal surface, revealing a faded emblem, a symbol she didn't recognize. Before she could think twice, she grabbed a nearby screwdriver and began to work at the rusted bolts. Her hands shook with anticipation, the old metal creaking under her grip. It wasn't easy, but after what felt like an eternity, she finally managed to loosen the last bolt. The hatch swung open with a heavy thud. The moment the boss and the 5 door creaked open, a rush of cold air hit her. Amber stepped back, her pulse quickening. The hole beneath the hatch led to a narrow stairwell, disappearing into pitch-black darkness. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals and something else, something metallic, like the inside of a long-forgotten machine. Amber's first instinct was to close the hatch and walk away. This was too much. There was no reason to go down there, but the pull of the unknown was stronger than her fear. She grabbed a flashlight from her tool belt and stepped closer to the dark stairwell. "Let's see what's down there," she whispered to herself, though her voice felt hollow in the vast emptiness of the gymnasium. The first step creaked beneath her boots, and the light from her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows along the walls. As she descended, the hum of some unseen machine filled the silence. It was low at first, barely noticeable, but it grew louder as she moved deeper into the darkness. The narrow stairwell was cold, unnervingly so. The walls, once covered in posters of school events and sports victories, were now bare and covered in mildew. Amber's light flickered again, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw movement in the shadows. Her breath caught in her throat, but she pushed on. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the light revealed a large, industrial space. The floor was cold concrete, and the walls were lined with thick pipes and heavy machinery. The air smelled stale, but there was something else beneath it, a faint, metallic scent, like the inside of an old vault. What the hell had she just discovered? Amber's heart raced as she scanned the room. The space was cluttered with old equipment and metal crates, their labels long since faded and unreadable. But what caught her eye was the large metal door at the far end of the room. It was sealed shut, but the light from her flashlight gleamed off the surface, revealing a small red button next to it. Her instincts told her to turn back, to leave the bunker behind, and pretend she had never seen it. But her curiosity burned brighter than the fear. She stepped forward, slowly, her fingers brushing the cold metal of the button. "Let's see what happens," she whispered to herself, a nervous chuckle escaping her lips. With one quick press, the light above the door flickered to life. Amber took a step back, startled by the sudden noise. The air hummed louder now, a mechanical whirring filling the room. The walls, once silent and dead, seemed to awaken. She knew in that moment that she had just unlocked something far beyond her understanding. Amber's heart raced as she stood in front of the metal hatch, her flashlight casting long shadows against the darkened walls. The building had always seemed like just an old school. But now, with this hidden door, she was beginning to wonder if it had been more. The rusted metal beneath her fingertips hummed with an eerie energy, as though the hatch itself was alive, waiting to be opened. With a deep breath, Amber grabbed a screwdriver from her belt and began working at the rusted bolts. The metal groaned in protest, but slowly, one by one, the bolts loosened. Sweat trickled down her brow as she struggled against the stubborn bolts, the cold air in the room thickening with each passing second. Finally, with a sharp clang, the hatch came loose. Amber's pulse quickened as she lifted the heavy metal door. Below her, a narrow staircase descended into the unknown. The darkness at the bottom seemed endless, like it was calling her, daring her to enter. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then, curiosity overtook her. She had already come this far. What was the harm in taking one more step? Amber descended slowly, the steps creaking beneath her boots. Each one echoed through the silent space like a drumbeat, heightening the tension. The air grew colder as she descended, and a low hum vibrated through the walls. She could barely make out the outline of the room below, but she could feel something, an energy she couldn't explain surrounding her. When she finally reached the bottom, her flashlight illuminated the space. It wasn't a storage room or a forgotten utility closet. It was something far more complex. A hidden bunker, full of strange equipment and ominous markings. Amber felt her stomach tighten. This was no ordinary school. Amber's flashlight flickered as she stepped deeper into the bunker, the narrow, metallic hallway stretching out in front of her. The walls were lined with pipes and wires, all humming with a faint electricity that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The air was thick, cold, and smelled faintly of chemicals. The further she walked, the more it felt as though she was stepping into a place forgotten by time, a place built to hold something dangerous, something that had been locked away for years. She reached the end of the hallway, where a large, heavy door stood before her. It was made of thick metal, covered in rust, with strange symbols engraved into its surface. Amber's hand hesitated as she reached for the handle. The door felt like a barrier, something meant to keep people out, keep them from knowing what was behind it. But the curiosity that had driven her this far was now a force she couldn't deny. She grasped the handle and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a vast, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with industrial equipment, massive tanks, and strange, glowing containers. Everything about the space screamed laboratory, but it was unlike any she had ever seen. The air inside was colder, and the silence was suffocating. Amber stepped inside, her flashlight sweeping over the room. She felt like an intruder, like she had uncovered a secret meant to stay buried forever. As her light moved across the room, it landed on a large container in the center. Inside, suspended in liquid, was something that made her stomach churn. A human figure, frozen in time, its features obscured by the liquid. What was it? And why had it been hidden here? Amber stood frozen, staring at the figure suspended in the liquid, her mind racing. It was human, that much was clear. But why? Why was it preserved in a tank? And who had gone to such lengths to hide it beneath an abandoned school? The room felt colder, the air thick with secrets that had been buried for too long. Her flashlight moved along the walls, illuminating the strange machinery that hummed softly in the background. It all seemed to be connected, to be part of some larger operation. The tanks, the metal containers, the rows of equipment, it wasn't just a laboratory, it was a vault. Whatever this place was built for, it wasn't meant for public knowledge. Amber's gut told her that she had uncovered something far darker than she could have imagined. She took a step closer to the tank, her eyes never leaving the figure inside. The face was blurred, obscured by the liquid, but Amber couldn't shake the feeling that she recognized something in the form. The figure was slightly hunched, almost fetal in shape, and it seemed wrong. Something about it felt unnatural, like it wasn't meant to be here, in this space, or in this time. Amber's breath quickened. She stepped back, her mind spinning with questions. What was this place? What had happened here? The files she had found earlier offered few answers, and now this. This body, this figure, only deepened the mystery. She turned her attention back to the machinery, trying to make sense of it all. The red emergency lights flashed briefly, casting an eerie glow across the room. As if on cue, one of the machines powered up, and a low voice crackled through the silence. Protocol 13. Containment breach imminent. Amber's blood ran cold. What had she just triggered? The voice from the speakers echoed through the room, sending a chill down Amber's spine. Protocol 13. Containment breach imminent. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, their meaning sinking into her chest with an icy weight. She turned sharply, her flashlight dancing across the room as the machines hummed louder, now almost vibrating the walls. Amber's heart raced, her senses heightened with a mix of fear and adrenaline. Every instinct in her told her to get out, but her feet wouldn't move. Her eyes darted to the control panel, the once quiet screens now flashing with an onslaught of cryptic symbols and red warnings. Emergency lights flickered above, casting an unsettling, crimson glow. The low rumble of machinery deep in the bunker filled the air, the sound reverberating like the hum of an approaching storm. Amber's pulse quickened. She had made a mistake. She had triggered something she shouldn't have, something that had been hidden for decades. She glanced back at the metal tank that had first caught her attention, its contents still suspended in eerie liquid. The figure inside, once an obscure silhouette, now seemed more menacing in the flashing red light. Its distorted, hunched form sent a shudder through Amber. What was it? And why had it been kept here, preserved in such an unnatural state? The answers seemed just out of reach, taunting her with their elusiveness. With a shaky breath, Amber stepped away from the tank, her mind racing through the possibilities. This wasn't just an old-school building turned into a forgotten bunker. It was a facility, a secret project, that had been hidden away for a reason. But what had it been designed for? What had it contained? The sound of the machinery crescendoed, and suddenly, a high-pitched alarm blared, slicing through the hum of the machines. Amber stumbled back, pressing her hands against her ears, as the sirens grew louder. A new screen on the wall flickered to life, and she barely had time to read the flashing text. Protocol 13. Initiating containment. Breach. Her stomach dropped. She understood now. Whatever this project had been, whatever had been locked away in this bunker, it was about to be released. But released for what purpose? Amber's breath came faster, her mind scrambling to make sense of everything she had uncovered. She turned toward the heavy metal door she had entered through, but the lock had already engaged. The door was sealed tight, leaving her trapped inside with whatever was about to unfold. Panic rose in her chest, but she shoved it aside, focusing on what she needed to do. There had to be a way out. There had to be answers. She grabbed the nearest control panel, frantically pressing buttons and switches, but nothing worked. The countdown continued on the screen. T-3 minutes. Amber's heart raced. What had she done? The facility seemed to be coming alive, and the air was growing thicker, heavier. She could feel the temperature dropping, a cold draft seeping through the walls. Her breath fogged in front of her as the lights dimmed further, the only illumination coming from the flashing red emergency lights. What had been kept here? What was about to be unleashed? Amber didn't have answers. She didn't know what she had triggered, but she could feel the clock ticking. She had to move. She had to get out before it was too late. But with every passing second, the facility seemed to tighten its grip around her. Amber could almost hear the building itself shifting, groaning as it prepared to release something that had been contained for too long. The countdown continued. She had no more time to waste. The door behind her was her only way out, and she had to get to it fast. Amber's pulse was pounding in her ears, drowning out everything else in the room. She had mere moments before whatever was contained in this facility was unleashed. The countdown was relentless, ticking away on the screen, as the room seemed to close in on her. Panic bubbled beneath the surface, but she fought to keep it at bay, focusing on the task at hand. The air was thick with tension, the hum of machinery vibrating through her bones as the walls groaned under pressure. The temperature in the room was plummeting, and Amber's breath formed visible clouds in front of her face. She could feel the pressure mounting, the building itself coming to life, as if awakening from a long slumber. Every instinct she had screamed at her to run, to get out, but there was nowhere to go. The door she had entered through was sealed tight, the lock engaged with no way to disable it. Her flashlight flickered, and the red emergency lights cast long, sinister shadows across the walls. The room was transforming, shifting around her. She could hear the low rumble of machinery starting up deeper within the facility, a sound that made her skin crawl. Whatever was locked away in this bunker, whatever was hidden behind these walls, was about to be unleashed, and Amber had no idea what it was or how to stop it. Her fingers flew over the control panel, desperately searching for any way to override the system. But the more she searched, the more the feeling of helplessness crept in. The screens were flashing rapidly, showing rows of codes and warnings she couldn't decipher. Every button she pressed seemed to have no effect. The countdown clock was ticking away faster now, each second a pounding reminder of the danger she was in. 2 minutes. Amber's eyes darted to the tanks and containers around her, the strange symbols and markings on their surfaces, and the unnerving figure still suspended in the liquid. What had she stumbled upon? This wasn't just an abandoned government project. It was something far darker, something that had been buried for a reason. The more she thought about it, the more her stomach churned. Had she accidentally triggered the release of something that was never meant to be free? Or was she merely a pawn in a much larger game, a game she hadn't even begun to understand? 1 minute. A loud hiss filled the air, followed by a series of mechanical clanks. Amber whirled around, her heart hammering in her chest. The figure in the tank, once still and lifeless, seemed to shift ever so slightly, as though it were stirring. A low growl, barely audible, emanated from the corner of the room. Amber's eyes widened in shock, her body frozen in place. Was it alive? Had the containment systems failed? Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She bolted toward the door, but the room seemed to stretch further ahead of her, the walls closing in, the machines coming to life around her. The countdown reached 0. Protocol 13. Initiation complete. A blinding light filled the room, followed by a deep rumble that vibrated the floor beneath her feet. Amber's eyes widened in horror as she realized, with chilling clarity, that she had just activated something far beyond her understanding, and there was no going back now. The blinding light that had filled the room suddenly dimmed, leaving Amber disoriented and gasping for air. The room seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and the mechanical hum had reached a deafening pitch. Her heart raced, and she took a step back, her eyes darting to the source of the disturbance. The tanks, the machinery, and even the walls felt alive now, as though the entire bunker was awakening from a long, dormant sleep. The very air around her crackled with tension. Amber could feel her skin prickling, as if every inch of the room were charged with static. She glanced nervously toward the tanks again. The figure in the central tank, once still and lifeless, was now moving ever so slightly. It shifted within the liquid, its form undulating, like a figure struggling to escape its confines. Amber swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. The lights above flickered erratically, casting harsh shadows that danced across the walls. She could hear a faint, guttural noise not from the tank, but from deep within the facility, coming from somewhere she couldn't see. The low growl was followed by a series of mechanical whirs, and then, as though in response to some unseen command, the large tank in front of her began to hiss. Amber stumbled back, her mind spinning. The growling grew louder, and she felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of danger, of something powerful being unleashed. Her thoughts raced in a chaotic blur. What had she done? The figure in the tank, was it some kind of weapon? Or worse, was it human? Had she accidentally triggered the awakening of something that had been locked away for a reason? Amber could barely grasp the reality of the situation, as the walls continued to hum, and the lights above blinked wildly. The countdown had reached its final moments, but the machines showed no signs of stopping. With a sharp click, one of the tanks began to drain, the liquid inside emptying out as the figure inside grew more distinct. Amber's legs went numb, and her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't look away. The figure, it was human, but not entirely. The features were too distorted, too wrong. It had been altered, changed in ways that were far beyond Amber's understanding. She could see now that it was a man, but his skin was ashen, his limbs thin and elongated, and his eyes were wide open, but empty, like they had seen something terrible. Amber's mind flashed back to the files she had found. Protocol 13. Containment, nuclear research, the words that now held so much weight. Whatever had been hidden here, whatever this place had been designed for, it was far beyond her comprehension. The figure in the tank had been part of something much larger, something dangerous. The growl from deeper within the facility grew louder, now more like a roar. Amber's heart skipped a beat. She knew she had to move, but her legs felt like lead, her mind reeling from the implications of what she had just uncovered. The facility was alive, and whatever had been locked away was about to be unleashed, and Amber had no way of stopping it. The doors had been sealed, the countdown had finished, and she was trapped. There was no turning back. Amber's breath came in shallow gasps as the low growl from deep within the facility echoed through the walls. The figure in the tank, now fully revealed, had begun to stir more violently, its limbs twitching in the liquid like a puppet caught in a malfunction. Amber backed away, her heart racing as the reality of the situation settled in. She had unknowingly triggered the awakening of something that had been locked away for a reason. What was it? Was it human? Was it alive? The growl grew louder, deeper, more guttural, and Amber could hear it moving closer. It wasn't just the figure in the tank. No, it felt like something more. There was movement throughout the facility, a shifting of energy, and the sense of something waking up. The machines had been powered up, and the countdown had ended. Whatever had been contained, whatever this Project Uplink was, it was now in motion. Amber felt a surge of panic, her mind scrambling for answers. She needed to get out, to escape before whatever had been locked away found its way out into the world. But the door behind her was still sealed tight, and there was no other exit in sight. She was trapped. The realization hit her like a wave, and her legs buckled slightly, but she caught herself before she collapsed. But just as she turned to face the tank again, hoping for some kind of answer, a voice broke through the chaos. "Hold on, Amber." Amber froze, her heart skipping a beat. The voice was familiar, one she hadn't expected to hear. She spun around, eyes wide with disbelief. Through the doorway, a figure emerged, silhouetted against the harsh red lights. It was a man, wearing a heavy jacket and a respirator mask, his form moving with purpose. He stepped into the room, ignoring the alarms, blaring, overhead, and the rumbling chaos surrounding them. "You're going to need to move fast if you want to make it out of here alive," the man said, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos. Amber's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Who was this man? How did he know her name? She instinctively backed away, her eyes darting around the room for any signs of danger. "I know who you are," he continued, stepping closer. "And I know what you've uncovered. You don't want to be here when everything goes down. We need to get to the control room, now." Amber's pulse was still pounding in her ears, but the man's presence was oddly reassuring. She didn't have a choice. There was no other plan. The danger was real, and the mystery of what was unfolding around her was growing by the second. Without thinking, Amber followed him, her feet moving on instinct. The man led her down a narrow hallway, past more tanks and machines, toward a small, unmarked door that she hadn't noticed before. The sirens were growing louder, the alarms more frantic, but the man didn't falter. He knew where he was going. As he reached for the door handle, Amber hesitated for a brief moment. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaky. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the door and motioned for her to step inside. "We'll have time for introductions later," he said. "Right now, we need to stop this before it's too late." Amber's mind was racing, but her feet moved before she could question him further. As she stepped into the control room, the door slid shut behind her with a loud clang, and for a split second, Amber allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone in this. But the man's next words sent a shiver down her spine. "They've activated the protocol. And now, everything's about to change." Amber's breath caught in her throat as the door slammed shut behind her. The control room was cold, filled with rows of blinking consoles and screens. Everything was flashing red. The alarms continued to wail, and the air felt thick with tension, as though the room itself was holding its breath. The man who had led her in stepped quickly to one of the consoles, typing rapidly as Amber tried to absorb everything happening around her. "What's going on? What have I triggered?" Amber asked, her voice tight with panic. The man didn't look up as he continued to type, his movements fluid and efficient. "You didn't trigger it, not exactly. But you're the one who unlocked it. Protocol 13. It's not just a system, it's a containment procedure. And you've just set it into motion." Amber's mind raced. Containment? Of what? What was this place, really? He paused, his fingers hovering above the keyboard, as though considering how much to reveal. His voice was quieter now, tinged with urgency. "This isn't just a research facility, Amber. It was a military-grade experiment, one that was supposed to be buried. Protocol 13 was designed to contain an entity, something dangerous, something far beyond what you've seen." Amber's heart hammered in her chest. An entity? But the tanks. The figures in the tanks. Exactly. The tanks are part of it. But you don't understand. They were experiments, bioengineered beings, or worse, weapons. What you saw in the tank, it's one of them. They were supposed to be contained here, isolated, kept away from the world. The man's fingers moved faster now, pushing buttons and bringing up more screens, data scrolling at an alarming rate. Amber felt her mind reel. How could a place like this have existed beneath a school? How could something so dangerous be hidden away for so long? "Where's the rest of it?" Amber demanded, her voice a mix of fear and frustration. "Where's the rest of the project? What's happening right now?" The man finally turned to face her, his expression serious. "You've unlocked something bigger than either of us can handle alone. The systems are activating, and Protocol 13 is going into full lockdown mode. There's a breach in containment, and everything in this facility is about to be released. All the entities, all the data. This place was built to keep them locked away, and now it's failing." Amber's mind raced. The figure in the tank had been a warning, but what was the purpose of this? Who had designed these experiments and why? "I thought it was over," the man muttered, turning back to the controls. "I thought they had taken care of it, but you opened the door, and now, there's no turning back." As he worked, the countdown clock, which had once shown minutes, now flickered erratically, showing only seconds before the next phase of the protocol began. Amber felt an overwhelming sense of dread build within her. And then, she noticed something in the corner of the screen, just barely visible beneath a layer of encrypted data. It was a name, Amber Williams. It felt like a blow to the chest. Her name. But why? Why was her name connected to this? The man noticed her reaction, his face turning pale. That wasn't supposed to be there, he muttered. You're not just a bystander in this, Amber. You're a part of it. Before she could ask any more questions, the screen flashed, the sirens blared, and the building itself seemed to shift, as though it were preparing to unleash something far beyond Amber's understanding. The door behind them rumbled, and with one final click, it began to open. But it wasn't an exit. The lights dimmed, and a cold wind rushed through the room. A low growl reverberated in the walls, and Amber knew, without a doubt, that the containment breach had begun. The legacy of this place was about to unfold, and there was no telling what the consequences would be.